This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
GPS, how are you?
I'm well, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. I wish I had my Reasonable Doubt shirt on.
Well, we can't both be rocking the merch. That looks a little silly.
I know, but
speaking of silly, someone who you and I both know who will remain nameless told me this week, we were talking about Reasonable Doubt and the various nicknames you've been trying to give me. And this person told me that I need to effort to be a little bit more silly on Reasonable Doubt and a little less serious. And I respect this person quite a bit. So I've been taking that to heart and I've been thinking quite a bit about that. And I got to be honest, I don't think this is a week where that's going to happen because I just don't feel very silly after this week. It's a serious time and, I'll try, but damn, it's been a week.
It has been a week. And that person, do you know what the characterization of you they gave was?
What's that?
Salty.
Yeah, I wear that proudly. I think that's true. But I think that person would also be the first one to tell you and my strongest advocate for the fact that I can be very silly and fun and giggly and I can be a real knucklehead and an idiot. And it's a steady balance that I'm always trying to find the middle of.
Did you ever think you would have to get on and defend yourself publicly on your show as being silly and a knucklehead, that as opposed to having people try to nickname you? You
wouldn't think so if people consumed all of the various places that I put myself out publicly, because I have other venues in which I am more silly. But, this one is one where you and I talk about serious subjects. So I try to keep it a little bit more serious here. And apparently the feedback that I'm getting from those that are closest to me is that I need to bring a little bit more of the silly to this venue. So I will effort to do that. But this particular week, that's a little tough because seeing some of the extreme views from both sides of the extreme sides of the aisle on the horrible thing that transpired this week, horrible things, but one in particular that stands out, has been exhausting, to say the least.
Yeah, I know. I have quite a few friends. I don't know Charlie. We've appeared or did appear virtually on a couple of things over the last couple of years, but I have a number of people that I consider very close friends who were very close to him and are very shaken up by it, as are people who didn't know him. And I don't know if that's a sign of the times or the fact that my reaction, at least in watching it, is it was so unbelievable that my first thought was that it was AI created, which is a horrible.
That would have been nice.
Yeah.
It's the person in question that I was talking about earlier tried 3 or 4 times to show me the extremely close up graphic version of the video that I know you've seen as well. I said no every time and have thus far avoided it. I know it will reach my feed eventually, and probably as a product of me talking about it on this show, I'll get it sent directly to me by a few people. But it's just, by the time that was going around and was offered my way, the reality had already set in, and I don't need a more graphic understanding of it. It's horrible, whether you've seen the most graphic video of it or not. It's just.
It certainly has touched in one. You have these moments, so to speak, that have historical antecedents who also push all of the buttons. Here you've got somebody who is, I readily will say, I don't agree with.
Same.
Most positions. However, I really always admired his ability to, number one, go in and argue and have debates, try to do it with humor, try to do it with
civility.
Civility and go into what would, I hate to say the lion's den, because then that evokes the Christian kind of ideas, but there's something about that too. He was not afraid to go to hostile, seemingly hostile places. Obviously, I think it was reported and not even talked about the fact that he was wearing a bulletproof vest or felt the need to have to wear a bulletproof vest, which is astonishing to me, and would go on to kind of one of the things that some people would always say about Pete Buttigieg is that Pete Buttigieg will go in and talk with people who don't agree to him, and famously will go on to Fox News with great frequency. And Charlie Kirk was recently a guest on Gavin Newsom and was recently a guest on Bill Maher's podcast, and had no problem going in and exchanging ideas with people who don't agree with him. And I was mentioning this on the other podcasts that I do with Harvey Levin, is from where I come from, and I readily will admit this, I when I first started practicing some 40 some odd years ago, there was a collegiality in the criminal law where you could battle it out with somebody in a courtroom. But in the 80s, at least, there was an idea that afterwards, I often will talk about going down to Little Joe's or going down to the Velvet Turtle on Hill Street in Chinatown and drinking with my opposition or with the judges that we were appearing in front of. There was that collegiality. The Criminal Courts Bar Association, when I was growing up, well before I became a lawyer, they had my father's erstwhile partner, Marvin Part, would write skits that were acted in by DAs and judges and defense lawyers. And there was this kind of camaraderie. You could battle it out during the day, but you understood that you were all working towards one common goal to some respect. I say all of that, and I give you that kind of history that I grew up around and have grown up around to talk about, and you've heard me kind of bellow on about the 90s and the 90s coming back. There was a divide starting in the 90s about where it became more ideological from a prosecution standpoint. And when you injected the justice system with kind of an ideological bent, as opposed to kind of what you have in the military justice system, which is one day you can be a prosecutor, one day you can be a defense lawyer, which my father, as I've often said, always thought was a wonderful kind of a system because you didn't become too wedded or too blinded, if you will, by the position you were in. We have become kind of blinded writ large by the positions we're in. And then I was reading this morning an interesting, because I also have been having the discussion for the last couple of days, is this a precursor for civil war? And I always push back against that. I just think that and maybe I'm Pollyannish, but there are some interesting arguments to be made about the run-up to the Civil War historically. I mean, there was a Chief Justice who was basically giving free rein to the Wide Awakes, which is the name of a group that was kind of pro-slavery in the day. There was and that was, I believe it was Chief Justice Taney, the Dred Scott decision. There were Supreme Court kind of obsequious, what were viewed certainly at the time in the polarization and in retrospect as being kind of obsequious to the executive branch and what was happening there and causing this kind of friction. Ironically, the Democrats and Republicans were kind of flipped at that point. And so I certainly hope that all of those are just historical coincidences and not history repeating itself.
Yeah, I certainly hope so too. And I echo a little bit of what you said on the other podcast you referenced with Harvey Levin, which is called Two Angry Men, which you can find at the Los Angeles Magazine YouTube channel or anywhere you get podcasts. But I'm with you a lot on what you said there, which is I'm less behind exactly where Harvey is, who seems if not convinced, very, very scared that we are on the 1 yard line?
He's convinced.
Okay. I mean, I didn't want to put words in his mouth.
By the way, he took a lot of heat this week.
Yeah, also. He did, because according to his explanation, and I take him at his word, because I know Harvey very slightly, but he seems a reasonable man, and he's friends with you, and I know you're a reasonable man, but he had to do an explainer video because while the news was breaking on TMZ's TV show, you could hear laughter in the background as they were explaining the Charlie Kirk news. And Harvey came out and explained that there was a police chase going on and that he had staffers in a different room who were watching that, and they were in no way reacting to the Charlie Kirk news. But yes, he did catch a lot of heat for that. But to go back to the Civil War, scenario that you were talking about, Harvey is convinced, or as convinced as someone can be. I am not quite there, but I, like you, am much more concerned with his position than I was when he was calling for a potential civil war over the deployment of troops to Los Angeles during the, I would say, overblown, sensational rioting that was happening back in early June. Not to say that it didn't happen, but it looked a lot worse on TV than it did in reality. Our offices are in downtown Los Angeles, and you could go to our offices and not really know anything was going on in the other part of downtown, which is about a mile away. So,
and one of the articles that I've read recently also was comparing the immigration sweeps with the slave sweeps, and part of the kind of the blessing of that by the Supreme Courts. And they were trying to draw the parallels. I know, once again, I can see the argument. I see what the argument is. I just don't know that I'm persuaded by the argument. I also, and by the way, it's an interesting thing, the kinds of things that cause movements, so to speak. I mean, when you take a look at George Floyd and the movement that point in time caused, and if there had not been a video having done, and actually this week actually arguing one of my cases out of state in front of the circuit court, if there had not been a video of George Floyd, I don't know that there would have been kind of that flashpoint. If there had not been a video of Charlie Kirk, I don't know that would be a flashpoint. And that those are interesting, what I always call black swan kind of moments that end up fueling things that are larger than themselves. I saw another video, and I don't know if this is AI, if it was actual. Did you see one that is reputed to be the
Signals.
shooter engaging with him and with a megaphone?
I did not see that one. I'm sorry. I thought where you were going was, I have seen one that has been sent to me. And again, in this age, I think we just kind of are going to have to say over and over again, I don't know if it's AI, but we've
been fooled once. So that's why I
think we've been fooled 2 or 3 times at this point. And I caught one live on the air that I think that we saved ourselves from. But yes, we've been fooled. So I don't know if this one was AI, but where I thought you were going was the video that I have been sent by a few people is people over his shoulder who are giving what, reputedly could be similar to signs that a baseball coach would give to a base runner, where just before the shot happens, there are people doing weird things with their hat and rubbing their arm or, touching their shoulder. So I've seen that a few times, but I have not seen the megaphone one.
Right. And I've had, I have a buddy who I have known for 50 years, maybe longer, who probably is I always kiddingly say is a semi-retired spook, who tells me it's not that tough of a shot, so to speak, because for those who have moved into the conspiracy angle. But that, to your point, I have heard also the signals, the hand signals. I've heard all of the conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk changing his position on certain issues, and that was what was caused. And one of the reasons I asked about the video that I've also watched, and wondering if it's real, if it is in fact this young man who was accused of the crime, who's apparently 22 years old, who apparently was confided in his father in one shape or another, who confided in a pastor who then either turned him in or convinced them to turn him in. I say all of that because if it is as simple, and it's a big if, that this was somebody who had been humiliated in a setting where he had engaged with Charlie Kirk, that speaks volumes, and kind of I think that's something that potentially could just turn down the volume of this and kind of deflate a little bit of the expansiveness of the reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm certainly rooting for anything that would deflate the responsiveness to this, because, as we talked about, Harvey's convinced, and, you and I are more concerned than we have been in the past when Harvey's been convinced. But, it's to say that this is someone who's potentially humiliated by Charlie. That was sort of his brand. He was famous for sitting in front of a sign that said, "Change my mind." And, then going on to debate people, and more often than not, leaving them looking pretty foolish. He was very skilled at what he did and held, strong principles that he believed in deeply. And he was able to navigate that in a very savvy way that a lot of people just, I don't think, really were prepared for the way they thought they were.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And he had a great skill set. And as somebody who persuades or tries to persuade for a living, and also kind of is challenged by the idea of a heavy lift, so to speak, or going against the grain, you hate to think that just by going against the grain that is the result. I mean, that's the whole idea of our system. Our system is designed so that starting with our first vice president, second president, who was a criminal defense lawyer who defended against the British criminal prosecution back in the colonies, and that you would hate to lose that kind of DNA of what this country is.
Yeah, you would. And you're right. You are in a very similar business of kind of going against the grain and having to change hearts and minds. But, I wouldn't want to go at either of you. And I think that people who don't understand that skill set sometimes think that, I hold my principles dear enough that I can defend them no matter what. And then you come up against somebody who has their 10,000 hours in debating these things, and it's just not the arena that you're built for.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I like it. And look, I'm old enough to remember I've talked about Drew Pinsky about this idea of that the kind of the demise of the liberal arts education is. I know that college education, for a variety of reasons, is under siege, but Drew and I both come from the what I like to call the effete liberal arts education, small school, liberal arts kind of ethos, and that kind of debate, that kind of turning inside out and examining the issue from every viewpoint. I don't want to call it a Socratic method, because that does a disservice, I think, to really what the expansiveness of the liberal arts education was. But there has been a legitimate demise of that. I also am heartened at times by the interest in things like the Joe Rogan podcast, the Midas Touch podcast, the other podcasts out there. One of the reasons I liked watching Charlie Kirk is I like this exchange of ideas. I like people who are intellectually curious and want to have an exchange of ideas and test the boundaries of it, and the intellectual banter. That is kind of what I think where I'm kind of educated out of and value. And that's something that I think should be relished and cherished.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think you've sort of identified sort of three kind of areas of the spectrum there with, Charlie Kirk had his podcast where he would have his discussions and his debates, the Midas Touch on the other side, and Rogan, who I wouldn't call center, but more in the center than either of those two. Those are all, I too value and enjoy the long form discussions and debates that happen in all three of those arenas. And they're different kinds of debates and they're very different arenas. But I think that kind of long form discussion and debate and, attempts to agree on subjects, where people can, I think that's valuable. And I think that that's something that is largely going away, as you highlighted in educational circles and other places. So I think that the places that it still does exist are valuable and should be cherished.
I agree. We'll get off our soapbox and
What I
really wanted to discuss this week was the Gene Carroll interview the E. Gene Carroll interview that I sent to you, but it seems like it's rather off topic and inappropriate, but maybe we'll return to it next week.
I have it saved. It was ready if we wanted to go there, but
why don't we end with it?
All right.
Let's end with it. This is, for those who don't know, there was, I believe, the second appellate judges affirmed the $83 million award that E. Jean Carroll and her lawyer, Roberta Kaplan, obtained against President Trump earlier. And then there's the interview of E. Jean Carroll talking about the trial and her preparation and what she did in front of the jury in order to, let's play it first and then we'll talk about why she did this.
Yeah, I'll fire it up here in just a second. It's I don't know. Okay, I guess I did start this out by saying we wanted to bring a little bit more levity, but here it is. Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to fire it up. My computer's running a little slowly these days, which is something that seems to be going around the office, as here we go.
That has to be pretty dispiriting. That then you're like, well, I got to be hotter to win this case.
Yeah, I got to be fuckable is the word. So what we did is we looked. I had a TV talk show in 1996. I went through some of the shows, took screenshots of my hair cut in a bob, and we did then I found the hairdresser and the makeup person who made me look like that in 1996. She came every day to trial, did my hair and makeup exactly like it was in 1996. I wore the exact same clothes I wore in 1996, the exact clothes.
Yeah, they're back. It's back in trend.
Yeah. Oh, I don't have a book here, but the thing I'm wearing on the cover, I bought it at Bergdorf's in 1993. So wow. That's the kind of... And I didn't look like I looked in 96, but I looked like somebody who could have looked like somebody in 96. And it was enough. So it was a trick.
That doesn't make you annoyed? That doesn't, your feminist juices don't start flowing over that? Like,
I'll let you bring the silly.
If that doesn't spawn a discussion, she had to look like she was fuckable, and the cockeyed expression of, does that get your feminist juices going? I'll leave it at that.
So will I.
Yes, there's no upside to engaging in any commentary on that. So
no, there's not. Mark, thank you so much for making some time and discussing an unfortunate week in the news business. But we look forward to you making the time every week, and we will look forward to seeing you next week as well.
Thanks, Gary. Talk to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.